Welcome everybody to podcast number 262. Do you have a project in trouble? Are you approaching it from the right angles? Are you looking at it with the right perspectives? Stay with us.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome everybody. I hope you're doing well today on this Friday. We're posting this podcast probably around 6 o'clock Eastern time. So I think, no. That's going to be Central time. So I think that's going to be 3 o'clock Pacific time, 3 a.m. Right now it's 3 a.m. Central time and I'm driving in the car. And so you're probably going to hear some wind, some bumps, some just car noises. So the audio is probably pretty horrible. Let me do a pause here real quick and see how bad the background noise is. Yep, that's pretty bad background noise. Anyway, I hope this podcast will work for you all. I really wanted to get a podcast out, but had to get to the airport, so woke up at 3. We're headed there right now, and so I'm recording this podcast for you on my phone. And the topic is going to be, how do we get the team's head up? So I've told you this before, I think, in podcasts. When I used to ride horses with my family, and we would take these horses up and down, not cliffs, but really steep mountains. My mom and dad used to say, keep the horse's head up. And actually, I did see some people get into some accidents where they were either tipped off, bucked off, or the horse stumbled and they had an accident. And I don't know if it's exactly true or not, but I always kept my horse's head up with the reins. And going up some pretty steep mountains and going up and down, I was always okay. I was always able to keep that horse's head up, and he or she, whatever horse I was riding, was able to stay afoot. And that's the theme of the podcast today. With teams, we have to keep their heads up. And there's a number of things that we have to look at in order to help teams succeed. So I'm going to give you some examples today, and we're going to have some fun. I don't have my outlines with me, so I'm not triggered to, I can't read the compliments and do a number of other things, but I can tell you that this afternoon, once I hit Phoenix, we've got a couple of things going. There's some equipment coming to the house so I can do some work on Saturday in the backyard. But today we're taking their boat out to the lake about noon to Lake Saguaro out east of Phoenix. And my parents are going to visit with us and go take that trip with us. So pretty excited about that. And so let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, forgive me a little bit. I might be a little bit disconnected because, again, I usually do an outline, and I've done an outline in my head, but I'm going to make sure that I do everything that I can to remember the topic and get through it the way I want to. So when there's a project in trouble, there could be a number of different things that are going on. And I've talked extensively about the steps that you would take to recover a project. And so I think you have those, and I'll cover those in more detail later, but I've got 2 podcasts about recovering a project. But there's a lot that goes into recovering the team or keeping the team's heads up. And so I want to cover that today. Every team needs to have the right leadership. They need to be embracing the right behaviors, the behaviors of trust, conflict, goal setting, accountability, and performance. And they have to have a strenuous performance goal. So if you look at those 3 concepts, those 3 components, if you look at the leaders kind of at the bottom supporting the team, and the team embracing those 5 behaviors, and then that strenuous performance goal at the top kind of magnetizing everybody to higher levels of performance, those are the 3 key things that I see constantly. So I'll talk about that briefly, and then go into with 3 examples. You won't know what those examples are from, but hopefully this will enable you to recover your own projects if you get into trouble. So let's start with the leadership. There has to be multiplier leaders on the project site. Multiplier leaders believe in people. They work through people, they mentor people, they coach people. They believe that people are smart. They challenge people to do their best work. And there isn't a lot of infighting there between the project manager and the superintendent. So a lot of times the problem is the project manager or the superintendent. 60% of the time when that is the problem, and this is just a guess, I don't have data, some things I have data for, but just as a guess from my experience, about 60% of the time you can get those two working well together with a couple of techniques. And so I just want to say the PM and the super, they have to be cohesive. They have to be working together. If a project team senses that those two aren't united and cohesive, nothing else will work. And so if a PM and a super aren't getting along, this sounds silly, but one of the first things that I recommend as a director or an executive or whatever, or as a consultant, is that they need to go to lunch or breakfast once or twice a week minimum, and go there without answering their phones, without taking work, without strategizing on the project. They just need to go there and work things out. They need to go there to better understand each other. They need to go visit each other's homes. They need to go camping. They need to go on a trip. They need to go just hang out in a restaurant and get it going, get it done, get some proximity. Even some of the worst enemies, there's a movie called Kong Skull Island. I think that's the movie name. Anyway, so an American Air Force pilot and a Japanese Air Force pilot end up on this island, and they're trying to kill each other in the opening scene. And then as it cuts away to go to other parts of the scene, King Kong shows up, and then it cuts away. But later on in the movie, you find out that those two, because they're isolated on that island, became best friends. That's the situation that we need to create for the project manager and the superintendent. They need to get some isolation. They need to find out how to become good friends, and they need to get it figured out. So if that can't happen, maybe there's some personal coaching that has to go on. Now for a team, and this goes for the multiplier leaders and for the team itself, going through the books, reading, reflecting, and implementing on the books the motive, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, death by meeting, and the advantage. And then 2 others if we're in real big trouble: the ideal team player and the truth about employee engagement, and actually another one, silos, politics, and turf wars. Reading, reflecting, and implementing on those books through some facilitation can give that team the language, the vocabulary, the focus, the philosophy, the theory, the concepts in order to turn that thing around. Some leaders just don't get along because they don't know how. And I've done podcasts before on this podcast that talk about using personality profiles, proximity, and also using high performance habits. Brendon Burchard talks about it in the book High Performance Habits. There are books called Atomic Habits. There are other books that I can recommend to you that really can get somebody focused in the right direction for how to solve their interpersonal skills. And some people don't have a high value or impression about personality profiles. I'm telling you, if 2 people can understand each other and get to know each other, they can start to build trust. Once they can start to build trust, they can engage in healthy conflict, and then comes setting goals, then comes holding each other accountable, and then comes performance. So if you look at the 3 key things that a team needs in order to keep their head up, number 1, the PM and the super have to be high functioning. Number 2, the team and the leadership needs to embrace those 5 behaviors. And then number 3, let's talk about that now. There has to be a strenuous performance goal. what we find is even with projects that are planned well, they have to be put on death ground. For instance, if you're a military commander and there's some dissension, some negativity, some whining, some excuses, some of these things happening with your units, what better way to get them focused than get them in an emergency? So if you engage them in a battle where the only escape is through the other side, through the enemy, they're backed up against a river, they're backed up against a mountain, whatever it is. The famous story of Cortez where he drilled holes in the boats and then set some of them on fire. That's a perfect example. So what is the problem? Some projects, they absolutely are in an emergency, but they're still infighting, they're still complaining, they're still blaming other people, they're still negative, they're still a cancerous influence. What's the problem? Well, there's two parts to that. They might be backed up against the river or the mountain, but they don't clearly see who the enemy is. So if you're going to put somebody on death ground, they have to have two things. They have to see that there's no other way out, and they have to see clearly who the enemy is. For instance, if they are if they're in a bad situation, but they see no way out on all sides, then they're just going to start infighting, and it's going to turn into Lord of the Flies, right? So the problem is if you have a project and you're like Jason, they're in an emergency, they have to get out, they're backed up against a wall, and they're only infighting, they're complaining, they're griping, they're being victims, they're not doing anything. That's because they don't see any way out. And so animals, humans, everybody will start to attack each other and start infighting if they don't see a way out. So when you put your team on death ground, when you get that third thing, which is to make sure that there's a strenuous performance goal, you have to make sure that they know where not to go and know where to go. You have to know where their river and their mountain is, and you have to show them the way out, and you have to show them the enemy that's in the way of getting out. So those three things: the way out, the enemy that's standing in their way, and where there's no way out. Those three things. That's how you put your team on death ground. So if you're working with a project management team that's struggling, have you clearly identified the next key steps, scripted the critical moves for them to get out? For instance, if you have a troublesome project, do they know that next month's set of milestones? Have you put it on one of those 30-day lap mat calendars of, hey, each week, these are the things we have to do to win. This is what winning looks like. This is what winning looks like. And here are the behaviors, the absolute focus that you have to have with the team in order to do this. And have you identified the enemy? Who's the enemy? The enemy is infighting. The enemy is waste. The enemy is waste and variation. The enemy is anybody that's, or not anybody, anything that's trying to derail us from this current path. Who are our allies? Our trade partners, the owner. Even though it's difficult, we are all on this same team and we have to work together. Where is there no way out? Well, this isn't going to magically fix itself. You're not going to be transferred from this project. It's not going to just magically happen. The owner and the trade partners are not going to figure this out, right? So this is what you need to do to win. Clearly scripted moves. Who are our allies, the trade partners and the owner, and ourselves? Who are the enemy? Who's the enemy? Waste and variation. And what isn't going to happen? You're not going to be transferred, and it's not going to fix itself. Okay, so we've clearly identified that. And once we clearly identify that, then we can start to focus in the right direction. Now, here's my advice with that. It has to be possible. A team needs to start seeing wins. So whatever milestones and accomplishments and focuses and efforts and coordination efforts and hurdles you want that team to overcome, they have to be possible. The other thing is the team will start to get frustrated with wins and non-wins. And so the team has to control what they can. They cannot focus on what they can't control. What can't they control? They can't control the number of change orders. They can't control the quality of workers. They can't control the way the facilities manager responds. They can't control city inspectors. What can they control? Cleanliness. What can they control? Safety. What can they control? Organization. What can they control? The stability of their schedule. What can they control? The stability of their huddles. What can they control? Their communication on site. You see my point? In order to get a team's head up, you have to get them focused on the right things. Wow, this is turning out to be a good podcast. So just like I said with the horse, I can't even remember if I've done a podcast with this theme before. If I have, I apologize. But so just with the horse, why do you keep the horse's head up? You keep the horse's head up, focused on what they're going, not on the terrain where they can trip. When you're on the road, you don't say, hey, look at that light pole over there, don't hit that. You say, focus on the center of the road. You want somebody's eyes focused on where they should go, not focused on where they shouldn't go. Like if you're going into a competition and you say to somebody, don't mess that up, then they're going to mess that up. Versus if you say, here's what you want to visualize yourself doing, right? So that's the key. And so and here's a little fun thing. My father-in-law used to say, hey, life is a lot like Silence of the Lambs. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie, but Hannibal Lecter said, you covet what you see. Not only do you covet what you see, but you also enact, you bring to pass those things that you see. You go where you're looking. And so that team, once they have the leadership figured out, once they are starting to engage systematically in the 5 behaviors, you have to keep their eyes focused and you have to keep their head up. How do you keep their head up? You keep their head up by focusing them on strenuous but possible performance goals that are immediate, meaning within the next month or 2 months. And you keep them focused on what they can control and not on what they can't. So like, for instance, change orders. They're not going to be able to control how many change orders they leverage, but what can you control? You can control that. That's my alarm on my car. Sorry for that. You can control the team focusing on on the contract work and having other foreman crews or other team members on that project management team deal with the change orders as a second priority. Everything can be broken up between what can they control and what can't they control. And if you do that, I promise you will have a better time winning and you'll get that flywheel going and you'll head in a good direction. Now, let me give you 3 quick examples so that I don't make this podcast too long and I can talk to you on my way to the airport here. So, a couple of examples. One project management team that I remember working with, they were complaining about everything. They were being negative. They were losing on some schedule ground and they weren't cohesive. The office hated the field hated the office. That team, they got to a point where, and here were the phases. They learned how to stabilize their project. They learned how to implement the last planner system. Then they learned how to implement tact planning to where they could actually see the schedule and work together on their strategic plans. They learned some principles on how to maintain their focus. And then when we went through the book, those books with the Patrick Lencioni books, The Motive, The 5 Dysfunctions, Death by Meeting, and The Advantage, they actually were able to rein it in and use that model to not only get closer as a team, but the lead superintendent, the project manager, started to go to lunch. They started to implement that vocabulary in those systems, and they turned it around. And I know that people get annoyed at me when I summarize things like this, but literally, they became the best project in that region, in that office. And people go to that project to tour to see how it should be done. And so I do want to say that system worked with them. Let me go to another example. There was another team that complained about not having communication, not having a strong field leader, and not knowing what the plan was. So all of the normal dysfunctions within that team, the project manager and the superintendent, sugarcoated it, but they really, really, really did not get along. And so in that instance, even though they really worked to get that relationship to get better, the superintendent was about 8 months away from retiring, had little motivation to make that progress. How old he was doesn't matter. Age is a protected class. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the distance away that he was from retirement and the leverage that he had on himself to want to change. And so even though it's super, super destructive to change out leaders on a project, they made the hard decision, got a new and more dynamic superintendent, started to implement those steps, and the project headed in a better direction. Let me give you another more dramatic example of a project that was recovered. The team had all the best people, and I'm talking like seriously the best people. Huge project. They had leaders that, the leaders got along, and they had strenuous performance goals. In fact, this team, one of the first things that we did was got them centered on a strenuous performance goal, and they actually started working on that. But the culture was still gross. It was still just cancerous. It wasn't working. And it turns out there was a key leader, the project manager, that he didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't a positive person, wasn't a leader of people, and was constantly dragging everybody down with really stale and siloed and kind of old, like 1980s corporate philosophy kind of management. And it just never got better. The team started to perform better together. They had a strenuous performance goal. They had a certain level of stability, but nobody would hold each other accountable. And it's because this leader literally wouldn't let anybody hold each other accountable. And they couldn't hold the owner and the designers accountable, so they never got flow. So literally, huge project, huge, like over $200 million. High profile job, probably one of the most high profile jobs. That senior project manager had to be removed. And there were actually one or two key positions there that had to be removed. And as this project was being recovered, the new PM was brought in, was taught those systems, and immediately, because that project now had all three components, they had the right leadership, they had the right behaviors, which they already knew ahead of time, before that change, and they had a strenuous performance goal. They started working in the same direction. So I am very cautious about when we attempt anything, I just do it. But when we in the industry attempt to recover a project and we go in and we think, well, it's about production control, or well, it's about schedule, well, it's about working with the trade partners, and we have a singular focus, but we don't look at all three of those concepts, we're going to get in trouble. Let me cover those again. You have to have a cohesive leadership group, cohesive leaders, multiplier leaders. You have to have a team that's engaging in those 5 crucial behaviors. And you have to have a strenuous performance goal. And if you don't have all 3, you're not going to be able to recover that team and keep that team's head up. So I hope that this has been helpful. Thank you for being patient with me with the free nature of the format of the podcast. I apologize for the bad sound. I hope you can get through it okay and still enjoy this podcast. On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing,